For many medieval women, the convent was far more than a house of prayer. It was often the only alternative to a life dictated by men. In a world where marriage was a business transaction, the cloister offered a different kind of contract. Noble families often sent younger daughters to the church to preserve the family estate and avoid paying multiple dowries. Once the heavy doors closed behind her, a woman's social status changed forever. She was no longer a daughter or a wife. For some, this was an escape from the dangers of childbirth or the heavy drudgery of domestic management. Within these stone walls, women found a rare opportunity for education. They learned to read, write, and study complex theology. Of course, many were truly moved by a deep spiritual calling, seeking a direct connection with the divine. The vow of silence and the rhythm of the liturgy provided a structured peace that the outside world lacked. In the community, they found a sisterhood that transcended bloodlines, sharing tasks from gardening to medicine. Entering a convent still required a dowry, though it was often smaller than what a secular marriage demanded. It provided a secure home for widows and unmarried women who might otherwise face poverty or isolation. An abbess could hold significant power, managing vast lands and negotiating with bishops and kings as an equal. These walls protected them from the chaos of war and the shifting whims of feudal politics. Life here was a paradox. It was a place of confinement, yet it offered a unique form of female autonomy. It was one of the few places where a woman's intellectual contributions were preserved in ink and parchment. Whether she was seeking God or seeking herself, the choice to enter the cloister was a defining moment of her life. In the quiet of the chapel, the noise of the medieval world finally fell away. The convent remains a testament to the complex lives women led behind the veil of history. The rule of Saint Benedict was more than a set of laws. It was a complete way of life. Silence was the foundation. By quieting the tongue, the monk could finally hear the voice of God. The day was strictly measured. The abbey bell marked every hour of the soul with precision. Before dawn, the brothers gathered in the cold chapel for the first prayers of the morning. Discipline was constant. Every thought was directed towards spiritual purity and humble service. Manual labor was just as sacred as prayer. Work kept the idle mind safe from temptation. Whether tilling fields or repairing stone walls, monks labored in absolute meditative silence. Even meals were silent. Brothers ate together without speaking a single word to one another. One monk read scripture aloud, nourishing their minds while they fed their bodies. In the scriptorium, the quiet was absolute. Only the scratching of quills on parchment remained. They copied ancient texts with painstaking care. Each letter was an act of devotion. Breaking the silence was a serious offense. It invited chaos into a world of perfect order. A brother who spoke out of turn might face public penance or days of solitary fasting. As the sun set, the bell rang for vespers, calling the community back to the chapel. Humility was the ultimate goal. A monk owned nothing, not even his own time. Simple wool habits were a constant reminder of their sacred vow of poverty. The physical toll was heavy, but the spiritual reward was believed to be eternal. Nightfall brought the great silence. From dusk until dawn, no speech was permitted at all. In this quiet, time felt different. Every second was a step toward eternity. This routine turned the abbey into a machine of prayer against a chaotic medieval world. While the world outside was often illiterate, the convent walls held a very different reality. Here, the mind was as nurtured as the soul, creating a rare sanctuary for feminine intellect. In the quiet of the scriptorium, sisters spent hours hunched over their desks. Their quills moved with a precision that turned ink into a form of prayer. It was not just text, it was an explosion of color and light. They used crushed gemstones like lapis lazuli to create blues that seemed to glow from within. Thin sheets of gold leaf were carefully applied to catch the flickering glow of the candles. These libraries became some of the greatest collections of knowledge in the entire medieval world. Philosophy, medicine, and theology lived side by side on these heavy oak shelves. Literacy was a precious gift. passed down carefully from one generation of women to the next. Noble women often chose this life specifically for the rare chance to study and write. An older nun might spend years teaching a young novice the complexities of Latin and Greek, but the intellect expressed itself through more than just the written word on a page. Music filled the vaulted spaces, composed by women who deeply understood the mathematics of sound. Think of Hildegard of Bingen, whose ethereal chant still haunts stone cathedrals even today. Their voices rose in complex harmonies that challenged the traditional plain chant of the era. Every illuminated letter was a testament to a woman's creative agency and skill. These books are the physical remains of minds that refuse to be silenced by their time. In these stone halls, the darkness of the Middle Ages found its brightest intellectual sparks. A single quill stroke could bridge the gap between the earthly and the divine. Preserving history was not just a duty, it was an act of quiet, persistent rebellion. Today, these manuscripts stand as vibrant proof of a hidden and powerful intellectual heritage. The gold still shines, reflecting a legacy of learning that never truly faded away. Through song and script, these women ensured that wisdom would survive the coming centuries. They were the keepers of the light in a world often defined by the shadows. Inside the stone walls of the abbey, the garden served as more than a place for prayer. It was a living pharmacy, where the sisters grew the raw materials for medieval medicine. Nuns were the primary healers of their age, blending spiritual care with deep botanical expertise. Every leaf and root was harvested with precision, then prepared in the quiet of the infirmary. They spent hours cultivating plants like lavender and sage, each chosen for its specific healing properties. Herbs were dried and stored to be used throughout the long winters when fresh medicine was scarce. This ancient wisdom was passed down through generations, creating a sophisticated system of natural remedies. Ceramic jars and glass vials lined the shelves, containing tinctures that could soothe a cough or fever. These apothecary rooms were the precursors to our modern pharmacies, run entirely by dedicated women. Nuns like Hildegard of Bingen documented these secrets, writing extensive guides on the natural world. Their manuscripts combined observation with tradition, preserving medical science during an era of uncertainty. In the monastery infirmary, the sick found a rare sanctuary of cleanliness and expert care. A nun's touch was often the only medical intervention available to the poor and the elderly. These gardens were meticulously planned, reflecting the order and balance they sought for the human body. Outside the gates, the local villagers relied on the sisters for relief from their daily ailments. A simple poultice or a brewed tea could mean the difference between life and death. By testing and refining their recipes, these women laid the groundwork for future medical discovery. They saw the earth as a gift, filled with hidden cures waiting to be unlocked by patient study. The quiet work of the herbalist ensured that the community remained strong and resilient. Through their hands, the abbey became a place of restoration for both the soul and the physical self. While most medieval women lived under the shadow of men, the abbess carved out a realm of her own. She was the sovereign of a vast monastic city, holding authority that many dukes envied. Behind the abbey walls, her command was absolute, reaching far into the secular world. Some powerful women governed double monasteries, leading both men and women with iron resolve. This was not just a religious duty. It was a massive operation of land and wealth. As a landlord, the abbess managed thousands of acres, collecting rents and overseeing production. She sat with stewards to review the harvest, ensuring the community remained an independent power. The iron keys at her side were symbols of total control over the local economy. Her high status often led to friction with noblemen who resented her autonomy and estates. When barons tried to seize her land, the abbess did not retreat or seek protection. Instead, she defended her rights in court, standing toe-to-toe with the most powerful. Her reach extended over hills and valleys, managing a network of farms and local villages. These lands provided the resources needed to keep her abbey a beacon of cultural stability. In her studies, she drafted letters to kings, influencing the highest levels of medieval government. The wax seal on her documents carried the weight of a legal and sovereign entity. She had the right to sign treaties and even mint her own coins in certain territory. This standing gave her a voice in a society that rarely listened to women. Her leadership was a blend of spiritual guidance and shrewd management of the monastery's future. From the soaring spires to the deep cellars, the abbey reflected her enduring strength. She worked with advisors to navigate the treacherous waters of medieval power and diplomacy. Her control over the treasury meant the abbey could withstand war or political upheaval. The abbey was not just a retreat, but a fortress of female autonomy. She proved that with land and legal standing, a woman could defy the mightiest kings. For centuries, the wealth of the abbeys grew steadily. Great estates and gold flowed into the church, but this prosperity eventually came with a heavy price. The spiritual focus began to blur. Power often led to complacency, and the once rigorous discipline started to soften under the weight of worldly gold. Inside the walls, the original fire of devotion flickered. Some leaders struggled to maintain the old standards against a rising tide of secular influence. Critics began to point at the comfort of the cloister. They no longer saw a sanctuary of prayer, but a protected fortress for the privileged few. Rumors of scandal, whether true or exaggerated, began to leak into the streets. The sacred mystery of the convent was losing its ancient luster. In some houses, the great libraries sat untouched for years. The intellectual curiosity of earlier centuries was replaced by routine and spiritual stagnation. The vibrant centers of learning were becoming mere relics. Dust gathered on the very manuscripts that had once changed the course of European history. Tensions rose between those who wanted reform and those who clung to tradition. Whispers filled the stone hallways as the world outside began to shift. It was a time of deep, quiet uncertainty. The sisters knew that the societal tide was turning rapidly against their entire way of life. Then came the printing press. New ideas spread like wildfire across the continent, questioning the very foundation of monastic existence and religious vows. Reformers like Martin Luther challenged the church. They argued that a woman's true place was in the home, rather than behind the abbey walls. Pamphlets filled the markets, mocking the clergy and calling for the total closure of the great religious houses that had stood for centuries. The gates that had offered protection for 1,000 years were now under siege. Political leaders saw an opportunity to finally seize monastic lands. One by one, the abbeys were forced to surrender. The keys were turned, and the residents were cast back into a world that they barely knew. For many women, this was a profound tragedy. They lost their homes, their community, and their only path to education and social independence. The silence that followed was heavy and final. The dormitories, once filled with the soft breathing of sisters, now stood cold and entirely empty. The Reformation had achieved its goal. The institutional power of the female religious orders was broken in many parts of the Western world. What remained were the stone shells of a lost era. The hidden world of women's spiritual authority was rapidly fading into the pages of history. Gardens that had provided medicine and food grew wild. The order and beauty maintained for generations were slowly reclaimed by the surrounding nature. The legacy of these women did not vanish entirely. Their writings and their impact on European culture remained buried in the quiet ruins. Though the gates were closed, the memory of their autonomy endured. They had proven what women could achieve when given the space to lead. The age of the great abbeys had ended, but the shadows they cast would stretch far across the centuries into the modern world.